Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in today. Want to welcome Janelle Ciesielski to our group. I'm glad I was able to pronounce your name correctly.
Yes, you did. One of the few.
Thanks so much for joining us. Janelle's actually been involved in our group before. She's been our author for the day, so it's great to have Janelle back again. So Janelle has a passion for heart-stopping adventure and sweeping love stories. She weaves fresh takes into romances of times gone by. When not creating dashing heroes and darling heroines, she can be found dreaming of Scotland, indulging in chocolate of any kind, or watching old black and white movies. She's been the winner of the INSPY and the Maggie Award. She is a Florida native who now lives in Virginia with her husband, daughter, and lazy beagle. So thanks so much for joining us. Have to mention I just finished reading your book, The Ice Swan, which I really enjoyed.
Oh, good.
It's probably a little bit different than a different theme than a lot of the historical novels that are around at the moment. So it was good to
Yes.
read something a little bit different. Um,
Yes.
Wondering if you want to start off by telling us a little bit more about some of your books.
Yes. So my latest book, The Ice Swan, it just came out in July, and it's set during the Great War. And it's about a Russian princess who is fleeing the Russian Revolution. And she ends up in Paris, where she meets a Scottish surgeon. And they get involved with the kind of underground Russian mob there in Paris and fall into some trouble. And then there is a marriage of convenience, which was supposed to help end the trouble, but unfortunately the trouble follows them. And then so not only are they dealing with that and the revolution from her homeland following her, but also trying to figure out how this whole marriage thing works. So that's it in a nutshell.
And how did you find it? Like, I presume some of this is based briefly on some things that actually did happen. How did you find out about all this?
Well, I didn't really know that much about the Russian Revolution besides the story of Anastasia and the Romanovs, which I think most people are familiar with. But I was watching a Russian miniseries a few years ago, and it was about these two Russian aristocratic sisters. And the revolution broke out, and it follows them as they basically have to survive now and change their entire lifestyle because they're being hunted down for who they are. And it follows them and the bond that they have and falling in and out of love and basically just trying to survive this revolution that's taken over their homeland. And it made me realize that I didn't really know that much about the revolution and what happened to the people. Like, we know what happened to the Romanovs and the communists, but what happened to the people, these aristocrats who were suddenly being killed. And so that made me want to write a story about it because I didn't know. So I wanted to learn more. So I figure I might as well put all of this in a book. So that's what I did.
So how did you go about the research? Where did you start off?
I found a book and it was recommended by someone else. It's called Natasha's Dance by Orlando Fikes. And it basically starts from, it's the entire history of Russia, starting from the Byzantine era all the way up through the Cold War. And it gives just an understanding, an in-depth understanding of how Russia became Russia and their society and culture and religion and, the echelons of the peasants versus the aristocrats, and basically how it evolved over the years and how the revolution came to be because of all of these things. So that was my major source of facts and understanding it. And then other fun things I like to do is, watch Dr. Zhivago, or I went and saw Anastasia on the stage. And so these are just little glimpses that they're not true, but we can still learn from them. So that's how a lot of my ideas and research got into the book.
And have you ever visited Russia?
No. maybe someday, hopefully.
Yeah. Hopefully you'll be able to. When do you wonders what your connection or interest is in Scotland?
Oh, back when I was in high school, I think I read a book. It was a fiction book set in Scotland, and it was really the first time I had heard or learned, I mean, about that culture and the history. And I just fell in love with it. I think sometimes when we read a book or we watch a movie and we're just captivated by that particular culture or that land or whatever it is. And for me, that was Scotland. And I call it my heart place because I've been able to visit there. I was supposed to go last year, but COVID. So hopefully next year. But the times that I have been, it's this indescribable feeling when you visit a certain place and you're like, I belong here. And I love their history. It's a very sad history. There's not much happy stuff that happened over there. It's very sad, but it's also very proud history and culture. And I love the music, and some of the food is pretty good, some of it not so good. And just, I guess, the romanticism that's built around it. And there's something tragically romantic about their history that I love so much. But the land itself, if you get to visit it, it is absolutely beautiful over there. It's wild and untamed, and there's just something magnetic about visiting a place like that. Like, I'm sure in New Zealand it's like that too, or I've had the privilege of going to Iceland, and it's incredible.
So. And would you like to, you have written other books, they're all historical fiction as well, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit about them as well?
Yes. So Ice Swan is my fifth book, my fifth novel. My first one is World War II. No, sorry. My first one was World War I. So I tend to stick in the Great War and then World War II, around that era. I would love to write something about the Jacobites set in Scotland, but for the moment, that's where I'm hanging out, is in the first half of the 20th century. And like I said, this is my fifth book, and I'll have another one during the Great War that will be coming out next year.
Yeah.
So they each kind of have to do with the war, but not the war. So I don't like to talk so much about battles and what's happening on the field. I want to know what's going on around. How is this war affecting people, and what are they doing? What are they doing about it? And
your books, are they set in a variety of locations?
Yes. So the Ice Swan is a little bit set in Russia, and then we have Paris and Scotland, and then in my other ones, it's France and England and Scotland. So those are the places that I typically write about. They're the ones I feel most comfortable writing in because I have researched them quite a bit.
And your new one that you mentioned coming out, whereabouts is that set?
Oh, it's actually all over the world. It's a little bit different. It is set during the Great War, but it's about this secret agency who tracks down international villains, and they go after them. So we've got part of it set here in the States, and then Russia and Romania and the Balkans, and just it's all over the place. It's like an Indiana Jones meets the Avengers mashup.
Sounds really interesting. And you obviously must have done a lot of research for your books. Just wondering if there's anything that you found when you were doing research that really, really surprised you.
I think for the Ice Swan, like I said, I didn't know much about what had happened to the aristocrats when they fled. And I was reading another book, I think it's called The White Russian, and I forget who the author is, but it talks about how these people who used to be dukes and princesses, and all of a sudden they were driving taxis and waiting on tables and longing to go back to Russia. And I had no idea. So that really surprised me, that these people who were at the pinnacle of their society were dropped down so low, and how much they had to readjust. and make a new life for themselves. So that was really an interesting part of the research that I didn't know about, and I was excited and but yet sad to learn about it and try to convey that in the story.
Yeah. Did you find much had been written about that in the past,
Not
or was
really,
it so it was
because
hard
when
to?
I come up with an idea, I like to try and read as much nonfiction and fiction as I can about it, just so I can get all those details. And I did have the nonfiction book, Natasha's Dance, but I was only able to find one or two nonfiction that I was looking for. There's a lot set during the Cold War or different time periods, but for what I was looking for specifically, I couldn't find it that much. So I had to take little pieces of what I had seen and try to cobble together what I thought it was.
And Wendy's wondering, at what time in your life did you decide that writing was your thing?
So ever since I was a little girl, I've always read stories and, I've written them down, but I never thought of doing it as my full-time job. So I went to college and I was reading a book and I just got so angry at it, and I decided I don't like the way all these books are written. I don't like how they end. I don't like what the characters are doing. So I'm just going to write my own story. So that's what I did. I started writing when I was in college, in between classes when I could, and it took me years to finish that manuscript, which was terrible and will never see the light of day. And then when I graduated college, I joined the military for 4 years. So I was working then and trying to keep up with the writing. And it was during that time where I thought, I actually wanted to do this. I don't want it to just be a hobby. So I got out of the military and was married. And I was lucky enough that my husband had a really good job when we got out, so I was able to stay home and start writing full time. And I found an agent, and then 5 years later I got my first contract. So I wanted to do it from the get-go, to be a writer, but I couldn't because it's not the typical path. It's just not. But it worked out really well, and luckily my husband, has a really good job, and I'm able to stay home and do what I want to do. And not only is it my passion, but I'm able to do it for a living now, which is awesome. I couldn't ask for more.
Yeah, great. And Wendy's wondering, when you were a child and growing up, were you as interested in history as well?
Yes. Yes, my mom would take us to the public library, and instead of sitting over in the kids section reading, little kid books, she'd find me on the floor in the history section reading biographies about Abraham Lincoln and the sinking of the Titanic. So from the get-go, I was always interested in history. I just think it's fascinating. It shapes our world, and it makes us who we are, and we can find out why we are and why we do the things that we do. And there's some really cool stuff that happened in history.
Yeah.
So.
And Geraldine's wondering how much plotting you do for your books.
Oh, I'm a big plotter. Yes, I love organization. So when I get an idea, I'll think about it for a little while, because usually I'm writing another book. So I have to think about it for a while. And then I'll take a couple of weeks to maybe a month to start to research it and start writing down the ideas. And I don't write a complete outline like this is, ironclad or anything, but I have the major points that I want to hit. I know how it's going to start, and I know how it's going to end, and I know the major, like I call them wave tops, that I want to hit throughout the story, but I leave myself room getting from those different points. So yes, I am a plotter. I want to know what's happening. I like that safety net, but there's a little bit of wiggle room, because you have to sometimes.
And what about your characters? Are any of them based on real people?
I do have real people make cameos in the stories, but not too much. I think, at least in my stories, the real people would take away. So sometimes I'll base one of my characters on a real person, or I'll take something that they did and put it in here. So, for instance, in the Ice Swan, the surgeon, Wynn, our hero, he performs these incredible and almost unbelievable surgeries where he massages the heart so it starts working, and he's digging out the bullets and stuff. That was taken from an actual medical journal that I read about the first heart surgeries. It was almost word for word. And so I took that instance and put it into there. I just kind of transformed him into that guy. So I'll do things like that, but I don't typically use real people in there. I think it's hard.
Yeah.
If you keep them, made up, then I can do whatever I want to with them without stepping on toes. So.
Yeah. And could you tell us what you like reading yourself? I'm interested if maybe you've read something lately you want to recommend to us.
Yes. So big surprise here, I read a lot of historical fiction. It's the main thing that I read. I love it. It gets my creative juices going. I love being in the world of history. So that's my first thing. I dabble a little bit over into fantasy. Some contemporary. It has to be really good, but not too much of it. Right now I am reading this.
Okay.
I'm not very far into it, but it is amazing. It's, I don't even know how you would classify it. Historical with fantasy. I don't know. It's amazing. It's very, very unique. And this one is amazing as well. It's like I don't know, an alternate universe about lady assassins and pirates who fly, houses around, and they do battle up in the air. It's crazy. I don't know, but I loved it. It's so unique. I loved it. And then this one, if you are a Hamilton fan, this is called Love, Theodosia, and I managed to snag an arc of it. And yes, if you are a Hamilton fan, you'll want to read this when it comes out in November. It's a star-crossed love story between Theodosia and Philip Hamilton. Okay. So it did not happen, but it's kind of a what if they did fall in love sort of a thing.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend those.
Yeah. Thanks for those recommendations. So the first two, are they new ones out as well, or are they?
Yes, this one, it just came out August, I think. And then I think this one 2 years ago.
Okay.
A little bit older. I got a lot on my to-read list, so I'm catching up a lot.
Yeah. They all sound like good ones. Liz has an interesting question. She says, I know you like to write about historical fiction, but have you ever thought about writing any stories based on the time you were in the military?
Back when I was in the military, I had a lot of questions, mainly as a woman, like how do you function in this very male dominant society? And there's a lot of basic things, that women have to deal with rather than men. And I thought, it'd be great to have like a guidebook for women who are thinking about joining the military. All of these weird questions, about like female hygiene and wearing combat boots, and can you wear lipstick, things like that. And so I thought about writing a book, like a military guidebook, and I started to, and then I never finished it.
Okay.
So yes, but I do have a lot of military stuff in my books because I come from a long line of military service. Obviously, I served. My husband did. My brother, his wife. We have a lot of military stuff going on. So it does make its way into my stories. So in one of my earlier books, he was a soldier, and he's talking about taking the sweat stains off of his collar by using baking soda, and how he cleaned his boots. And those were things that I did. So I did include little Easter eggs, I guess, in there about my time in the military and just my way of getting it out there.
Yeah. And what do you hope readers will love about your books?
I hope that they will learn parts of history that they didn't know about before. I love finding those things myself. I love talking about them. I love learning about them. And I hope readers do too. I hope that when they read my book, it makes them think, oh, I never knew that about the Russian Revolution. Or, oh, I learned something about where cardiology began. And maybe they'll go out and learn more about it as well. So, yes, that's what I hope readers will get from that.
And do you find when you're doing research for one book that you come across something else and think, oh, that would actually be great for another book?
Yes. All the time. It's a huge problem for writers. We'll be writing this book and then, oh, but this other idea sounds so much more fun. I want to start that one. And you can't. You got to finish what you're doing. So I write them down and I tuck them away, and I start thinking about it, like hopefully to turn it into a story later on. So yes, it happens all the time.
So do you have quite a long list of potential subjects of new stories?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. I do. There's never, and sometimes I think, oh no, I'm never going to have another idea. And then I always get another one.
Yeah. So when you're going to start on a new book, how do you choose which one you're going to use?
Usually there's one idea that really just stands out to me and it just really excites me. And I know that's the idea. If you're excited about it, that's the book you want to write. If it's not an exciting idea, don't write it. Maybe it has to wait. I've had several like that where I thought this is a great idea, but it just wasn't the right time. And so I had to wait a while and then I'd go back to it and it was okay.
And if you could be a character from one of your books for a day, who would you choose to be?
Oh, that's a good story. I think I might be Kat from The Socialite, which is my red, that one right there. Just because she got to wear like really glamorous clothes.
Yeah.
And red lipstick all the time. And I love nice clothes and stuff. So I'd probably want to be her for her wardrobe.
Yeah. And could you tell us what you think being a successful writer means?
For me, it means loving what you're doing. And I love what I do. And I always say that even if nobody ever reads my stories, if I never get published again, I'm going to keep writing because that's what I love to do. And the fact that I am publishing novels and people are reading them, it means a lot to me. Like it really does. So that is what success means to me.
Yeah.
I may never make, a best-selling list. I may never get $1 million. It doesn't matter. What I'm doing right now means success to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's different for everybody. But I am so happy to be doing what I am doing. So that's success.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And what do you feel about book reviews? Do you read your reviews?
I do. I do. So a lot of authors will say, no, don't read them because they're for, readers and stuff, which they are. But I can't help it, especially when the book first comes out. You want to know, do people like it? Do they not? What's going on? So I'll read the first ones that come in, but after a while I stop reading. I don't think you can keep doing that forever because there's great ones and then there's not so great ones, and it's easy to get caught up on them, but you just need to put those aside and just keep doing what you're doing. So
and you mentioned before your new book. When will your next book be out? May
of 2022.
Yeah.
So it'll be coming out soon. I'm in edits right now, which is not fun at all, but they're necessary.
Yeah.
So
does that, because you're in edits of that one now, does that mean you're starting a new one, thinking about your next one, or where are you?
Oh, I'm in the middle of writing. So the one that's coming out in May is actually part of a duology.
Okay.
So I'm writing the second book in the duology right now.
Okay. Oh, wow.
And when that is finished, yes, I have an idea for the next book, and I'm eager to get to it.
So is this the first time you've done a duology?
Yes. and it is exhausting.
Yeah.
I started it, well, I pitched the idea last January to my editor, and I started writing it, I think, in March, and then COVID hit. And then my husband was home, and my daughter was home from school, so trying to write with all of this chaos and stress that was going on, it was really hard. And then on top of that, it was a duology, which I've never done, and it's very intimidating, and it's a big story. There's a lot happening with it. So it was like the perfect storm. But I'm hoping that my editors can get it all together and it comes out well in the end.
Yeah.
So.
And how have you found being able to do research during COVID?
It was hard. Like I said, when my daughter, when they canceled school, I became a full-time mom again. And it's very hard to balance that because I needed that time when she was away at school for, 7 hours a day, and I didn't have it anymore. I had to lock myself down in the basement and try and get stuff done. And I did the best that I could, just like everybody else is doing. And it was tough, but I mean, luckily it was an era and a lot of stuff that I had researched for previous books. So I was able to draw on that. Yeah. Thank goodness.
Yeah. And have you found that it's been slower writing more recently, or?
Yes. Yeah. It was, I was lucky if I would get a paragraph done a day, to where pre-COVID I was writing like 3 pages a day. Wow. And it was, it was a big kick to the pride that I couldn't reach the potential that I knew I was capable of. But it was a tough year, and everybody had to adjust. And, school has started again, and things are starting to look normal again. So I'm trying to get back into the groove of being a full-time writer.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for talking to me today. Been great chatting to you, and
thanks for having me.
Forward to seeing your new books and reading some of your others that I haven't read yet.
Yes, please do.
And hopefully we might be able to have you back again when you have your next book out.
Absolutely. I would love to.
And thanks everyone who joined in and for the questions that everyone asked. Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.